Hello and welcome back to Wendy's Way. Today we're continuing our journey in food. I'm going to do something that I typically don't do. I know I've said in previous videos that when I'm cooking, I like to play. I like to mix things up and make them unique. When I bake, I pretty much stick to a recipe, for cakes and pastries and things like that, because the amount of leavening and shortening and baking is kind of a science. Cooking is more of an art. So today I'm going against my own grain. I'm gonna mix it up on my bread recipe. I've always wanted the wheat bread that I make to be as tall and soft and moist as the white bread that I make, but I have yet to accomplish it. So today I'm gonna try something different. I'm gonna use wheat flour, and I'm gonna use brown sugar instead of white sugar. I'm going to use 3 tablespoons of yeast instead of, 4 tablespoons of yeast instead of 3. And I'm gonna put honey, probably up to a cup of raw organic honey in the dough. And then maybe when I butter it fresh out of the oven, maybe I'll make a honey butter or brush it with butter and drizzle it with honey, something to that effect. Anyway, we're gonna give it a shot. Let's see how it turns out. Jump in with me and let's do it Wendy's way. All right, our yeast has proofed in the hot water and brown sugar. So step 1 of our alteration of the recipe was a success. I didn't know whether yeast would proof well in brown sugar the same way it does in white sugar. I guess they're both sugar, but something makes them different. So anyhow, another reminder, not only am I using brown sugar, wheat flour, additional yeast, and adding honey to the recipe and to the topping at the end, I'm also not melting the shortening. The original recipe that I started with called for cooking oil anyway, and I don't use cooking oil. I use butter. Good grass-fed Kerrygold butter is my choice of shortening in almost everything. And I'm sure that a Crisco or a home-rendered lard would give much better texture and shortening potentially. But this is what I have, this is what I prefer, this is what I use. What I meant to tell you is that instead of melting the butter, I'm going to be adding it in at room temperature so that it'll work in, but it will not be liquid, because I'm adding an entire cup of honey. I thought maybe keeping the butter at room temperature and a little different consistency, at least until I get my warm paws all over it, maybe that'll work. So we've got our yeast fully proofed. Let's get ready to jump in and get our hands dirty. As you can see, the yeast proofed really, really well with the brown sugar in the warm water. It is darker, which is gonna be beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to the flavor, to see what this really tastes like. I think I'm gonna add the honey first, because typically I would add the liquid butter, but it's not liquid this time. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the honey. I did a full cup, and I misspoke earlier. The honey that I have here, it is raw and it is unfiltered, but the label did not say organic. So there's a correction there. One thing I thought of this morning, I am going to start compiling the recipes that I make. those things that I have customized and, you know, made my own. I'm gonna create a little Wendy's Way cookbook. And I don't know if anyone has watched the video where I talk about Patreon, but I'm thinking the Wendy's Way recipe book, when I get it printed, published, will be available for purchase for my regular viewers, and for my Patreons it could be a free gift. All these ideas just keep popping in my head. I tell you what, the Holy Spirit knows how to inspire me. Okay, I'm going to start with the first 6 cups of wheat flour, the yeast and the honey, the sugar, and the salt was in this flour bowl as well. So all we have left to add, after we get this mixed up, will be the ½ cup of room temperature butter shortening and 6 more cups of whole wheat flour. I may end up adding a little more. It just depends on how wet this dough is because of all that extra bee's knees that we put in. What would you call honey? Buzz milk? Ooh, buzz milk. That is a good idea. Alright. I have to copyright that one. Ha ha. Alright. Let's get this, all this flour wet before we throw in more. Might save the butter for last, just because, you know, my hands are going to liquefy it just from my normal body heat, so we'll wait. Oh, yeah, I think it's going to take it all. I have more for the kneading. So we'll see how this goes. Sure, I'm glad you joined me today. As always, I'm using my Rada ice cream scoop to mix my dough. I got out a bigger bowl this time. I have several of these, I guess you'd call it porcelain, painted metal bowls. Wow. We'll need to edit that out now, won't we? Camera just took a tumble. Maybe we won't edit out. Maybe you need to see reality TV at its finest. Reality YouTube at its finest. Every now and then the camera hits the danger zone. It's amazing, honestly, that it doesn't happen more often because, you know, not only can a tripod be a little tippy, the island that I'm working on is on casters. So if I should happen to lean against it, it moves. Okay. It's not. Well, I'm just going to be quiet and pull here for a little bit. You don't want to hear me huff and puff and try and talk, right? Okay, I think you've probably watched me knead long enough. I'm gonna keep going just a little while because I'm not quite satisfied with the elasticity, but I'm getting there. So I'll bring it back when we're further along. Have you ever made honey butter before? I'd never done it, and I was really surprised at how quickly and totally honey disappears into butter. I had just a stick of room temperature Kerrygold grass-fed butter and probably a couple of tablespoons of raw unfiltered honey. And I just mixed it together with a spoon, and it just instantly went together. You can't see the honey at all, but it's sweet and it's yummy, and it's gonna go on these loaves of my first homemade honey wheat bread, where I adjusted the recipe a bit, trying to get a taller, lighter loaf of wheat bread, and so far so good. They really do look bigger. They look pretty much as big as the white loaves that I get from the recipe. You know, like I said earlier, and I was showing you, I added an extra tablespoon of yeast. The two on the other side of the oven look a little bigger. They were baked on the lower rack, and these two over here on the upper rack, they're a little browner. But anyhow, I added a tablespoon of yeast, a cup of honey. I added my shortening, which is butter instead of oil, at room temperature rather than melting it and adding it as a liquid. And then I added honey to my butter. And now I'm all slathering it on. And don't you know that later today we'll be spreading this honey butter on the bread after it cools, and we can eat on it. Anyway, that's what they look like fresh out of the oven, and we'll continue on here in just a second, doing it Wendy's way. Okay, I have to say, I'm delighted. As far as I can see, they turned out almost as big as the white loaves. Maybe not exactly, but they're a lot bigger than any wheat bread I've ever made before. So I'm gonna call this one a success. I'm excited. I'm very delighted the way this turned out. So I'm gonna write up the way that I made it, the way that I altered the recipe, and I'll do this again. And it'll end up in the Wendy's Way cookbook. What do you think? Thank you so much for joining me. I pray that the good Lord, who blesses me every day and who gives me wonderful ideas on how to adjust recipes, blesses you as well as he blesses me, today and every day.